Hey folks, Alan Saunders with Pittsburgh Sports Now, and I'm joined today by Chris Vinel, who is the editor of the Miami Student, and he covered Miami basketball last season when newest Pitt guard Nike Sibande was a member of the Redhawks. Chris, thank you so much for joining us and helping our Pitt fans learn a little bit about Nike and his game from his time at Miami.
Oh, absolutely. Excited to be here and excited to talk about Nike.
Yeah, so I mean, guess first of all, what can you tell us about the guy, the player? General overview, I guess.
He is extremely athletic. And when I say extremely athletic, I mean that. This is a guy who had a 48.5-inch running vertical. I've seen him take off from nearly the free throw line to dunk balls, and he's just nuts. I mean, he's not an athletic freak, essentially. He's an athletic freak. He's not a guy who's super, super polished at this point. The big knock on him is kind of his basketball IQ and his focus. But when he is locked in, he can fill it up on the offensive end, and he's still a pretty good defensive player with that athleticism and that length.
Yeah, I was talking to him, and he feels like he can bring sort of an immediate spark and energy on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. That's something that is, when we look at Pitt's team, we're not sure if he's going to be eligible to play this fall, but they could certainly use. Another thing they really need is shooting. What's his outside stroke look like from that shooting guard or wing spot?
He's kind of streaky, but overall, I'd list him as a pretty good shooter. He shot about 33% last year, which of course isn't bad, especially as a high volume shooter. But I think his upside there is pretty good, and he's gotten better as he's gotten along. He's gotten more efficient. Last year was the first time he shot above 41%, ended up finishing 44% on the season from the field. So pretty good numbers there, and I expect that to continue. Not exactly, although I wouldn't describe him as like a three-point specialist, he can do that. He's kind of an all-around scoring guard, though.
I know, Pitt fans have seen teams from the MAC, obviously, but what was sort of the level of competition when you put those numbers into context? Like, who were some of the non-conference games that he played against that you can point out? And just in general, how do you feel like he'll be able to make the transition from the MAC to the ACC?
Well, he's kind of like any other MAC player where you're going to play some really good teams, such as they played Bradley last year, who made the NCAA tournament during his career at Miami. Sibande played teams like Ohio State and a bunch of different tournament teams, but they also played some cupcakes that'll inflate your numbers. There was one game where he put up like 25 points against essentially a D3 school in Midway, or an NAIA school, I'm sorry. And so you'll have games like that, but overall, he's a guy who really kind of rises to the competition too. I remember his freshman year, Miami traveled to Columbus to play Ohio State, and very early on in that game, he posterized someone. I mean, he's not scared of anything, and he truly believes, and I've gotten this from talking with him many times, he truly believes he is one of the best players on the court, if not the best player on the court, every time he steps on it. After his freshman year, I was talking to him, and he said, I only plan to be here one more year, talking about Miami, talking about college. He fully planned to go to the NBA after his sophomore season. He kind of explored that. He did declare for the draft, didn't hire an agent, though, so he was able to come back after the year. But he got feedback from NBA teams and said they were really high on him, said they really liked his athleticism, like I mentioned earlier, his ability to score the basketball. And also Brad Stevens, the head coach of the Boston Celtics, who's kind of world-renowned for his defense and his defensive ideology, he was the one who told Nike, hey, I really like your defensive potential. He's not there yet, but just because of that athleticism, he's able to get into passing lanes. He's able to, gamble a little bit more than other players would be able to. And he's a pretty good one-on-one defender when he's locked in.
Yeah, Pitt fans know all about Brad Stevens. There's some long history there. When I look at the Pitt roster this year, they'll be the third season under Jeff Capel. It's been a rebuilding job, obviously. One of the things that they still really haven't been able to do is they haven't been able to get old. They're going to have 5 freshmen, and they're only going to have Nike will make 2 seniors. How do you think he'll perform in a leadership role, or just sort of fitting into a new group of guys as an older guy and maybe be able to bring some of those younger guys along?
That's somewhere where he really grew this past season, I think. During his first 2 seasons, and he admitted this too, he just kind of was going out there and playing his game. He was worried about doing the best he could, whereas last year he tried to become a more vocal leader. There were instances it was against Bradley, one of the teams they played that went to the NCAA tournament in 2019. They played them early on in this non-conference season this past year, and Nike stacked the team up before the game and said, hey, we're not losing. And Miami went on to win. He dropped something, 20-something points, had a great game, and just kind of took that leadership role. There's other instances, where they're down in the second half, and he did sort of the same thing. And every time Miami's head coach, Jack Owens, would come into the press conference after the game and say, hey, this is what Nike said, and it kind of spurred the team. So he really tried to become more of a vocal leader. I think it's still a work in progress, but, especially if he gets this essentially a redshirt transfer year, if he sits out, if he's able to get that and kind of gel with the team for a year and then step onto the court in 2021, I think that'll help Pitt out exponentially, especially if they're still a young team. I mean, Miami's been a pretty young team the past couple of years too, so he has experience on those sort of teams, but he was one of them guys. So now I guess he can take that experience and kind of apply it.
I mean, when I talked to him earlier this week, he said, the biggest thing for him was he wanted to play against a greater level of competition, and that was the reason he left Miami. Is that sort of the sense you got too? And, what was sort of the reaction, I guess, amongst, I don't know, the team or people around the program about him leaving and ending up at Pitt?
I don't think anyone was really surprised about him leaving. It was kind of a surprise just because it wasn't on his list of his final 5, which he put out about a month ago. Pitt wasn't on there, so that was kind of shocking. I was kind of shocked when I heard that. But I don't think anyone was really surprised with him leaving. He's said numerous times that he has aspirations bigger than Miami University, and no one was faulting him for that. Talented guy, And like I said, he's kind of stepped up against superior competition. And so him trying to take that next step, get more exposure, and play better competition, trying to get into the league, that's his ultimate goal. I believe it's a good step for him, and one that no one really was surprised about in the long run.
Chris, thank you so much for your insight about Nike. I know we've got the Red Hawks on the football schedule this fall as well, so maybe we'll bring you back on. And
absolutely, anytime.
Well, that's Chris Vinel, editor of the Miami Student. Chris, where can they find you? Twitter, that kind of thing.
Twitter, I'm at Chris A. Vinel, and I guess that's all I need to plug, right? I don't have any. I'm not an exciting guy,
You also you cover some other stuff too, is right? Beyond your work.
I do. So I'm a contributor at SI.com, the Falcon Report, covering the Atlanta Falcons remotely right now. I'm stuck in Cincinnati because of the coronavirus. But yeah, so follow me on Twitter. Go check out the Falcon Report. And Alan, thanks again for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Chris. And thanks everyone at home for watching as we continue with our Pitt basketball offseason coverage. Jeff Capel finishing up his class of 2020 with Miami transfer guard Nike Sibande. Thanks for watching. I'm Alan Saunders with Pittsburgh Sports Now.